Last year, I promised you all that year-round we would be discussing historical black figures that haven't really been talked about, and some you might not even find in your textbooks. Well, it's a new year, Black History Month has passed. I'm pretty sure you're not going to hear anything about anything related to Black history until next February. And that's what we're here for. And I'm proud to say that we are back on a permanent basis now. So sit back, relax, let it take the reins for a little bit, and let's head into our first topic. So now we seem to be in the age of superhero movies. I myself like a superhero movie from time to time. The Iron Man, Daredevil, Incredible Hulk. They're fictional characters that perform superhuman feats on a daily basis. But now what about those average people that don't have superpowers? That are real life figures that have done things that normal humans don't do every single day. Well, we're going to talk about one of those figures today. And the name of this man, or the actual real life superhero, is Bass Reeves, the first U.S. Deputy Marshal, or Black U.S. Deputy Marshal, west of the Mississippi in 1875. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and get into a little bit of his history, give you a little inclination of what Bass Reeves did and where he was from. Now, Bass Reeves was born a slave in 1838 in Crawford County, Arkansas. And Reeves wasn't actually his last name. Now, you got to remember, around that time, slaves, well, they had to take on the name of the person that owned it. Now, his owner was a man named William Reeves, who was a politician and a farmer. Now, as Bass Reeves grew from a young man to an older man, he started out as a water boy and then became a field hand later on. Now, William Reeves had a son whose name was George Reeves. And at the time, once Bass Reeves got a little older, he became a traveling companion for George Reeves. Now, when the Civil War broke out, Texas sided with the Confederacy. So when that happened, George Reeves went into battle and he took Bass Reeves with him. Now, during the Civil War, it's not really noted anywhere what actually happened between Bass Reeves and George Reeves and how they separated, or even why they separated. Bass Reeves separated from George Reeves, and he escaped into the Indian Territory. Now, before we get into what happened after that, let's back up a little bit, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Indian Territory so you can kind of get an idea of the area that he was in and what took place there. So we're going to go back to about 1830. President Andrew Jackson signed a bill called the Indian Removal Act. Now, what that act did was basically take the 5 civilized tribes of Indians from their ancestral lands and sent them west of the Mississippi to Oklahoma. Yeah, it's what you think it is. The land was very diseased. It was very hard to grow crops, but that was a bill that was passed by Congress and Andrew Jackson signed on. At this time in 1830, there was no federal jurisdiction over that land. It belonged to the 5 tribes of Indians. But because there was no law, every criminal hid out in the Indian Territory to basically escape the law. So now we're going to go back into Bass Reeves and tell you a little bit more about what happened after he fled the Civil War. So after he fled the Civil War and he parted with George Reeves, he fled to the Indian Territory. Now, from what I said before, you all know exactly how dangerous the Indian Territory was at that time. While he was there, he hid out with the Seminole Creek Indians. And during that time, he honed his pistol shooting skills to near perfection. Now, when he was asked about his rifle shooting skills, he basically said, I'm okay. But the man was barred from every turkey shooting competition they had. That says a lot about how good of a shot he was. So after the Emancipation Proclamation in 1863 that freed the slaves, Bass Reeves left the Indian Territory and went to Van Buren, Arkansas. There he raised a family with his wife while he farmed. Now, they had 5 boys and 5 girls. And that's basically where he stayed for about 12 to 13 years before he was called to action to police the Indian Territory. So now we talked about how Bass Reeves was living his life, farming, living with his family, his 5 boys, 5 girls, and his wife. We're going to get into exactly how he was conscripted into working in the Indian Territory. Now, around May 10th, 1875, Isaac Parker was put in charge of the federal district court that was supposed to basically police the Indian Territory. Now, mind you, previous to this date, the Indian Territory was a lawless zone. There was no federal or state jurisdiction. So now this man was in charge of basically maintaining and bringing in the criminals from that area. How do you do that? Well, you need bodies, first of all. So what he had to do was basically get a U.S. Marshal that he assigned to hiring other U.S. deputy marshals to maintain the area. So what did Judge Isaac Parker do to maintain order in the Indian Territory at that time? Well, he hired a U.S. Marshal by the name of James Fagan. He was tasked with hiring up to 200 U.S. deputy marshals to help him police the Indian Territory. I should say he didn't get about 200. He only got about half a dozen. And that included Bass Reeves. Now, a few of the reasons why James Fagan went after Bass Reeves was because of his extensive knowledge of the Indian Territory. And 2, because he spoke all of the tribal languages in the area. So after 35 years of service as a U.S. Deputy Marshal, Bass Reeves had over 3,000 men brought to justice, only killing 14. Something he used to say was he would only kill unless it was absolutely necessary in the protection of his own life. That's how dedicated this man was to his job. Now, one of his more interesting bounties was one on his own son, Benny Reeves, for the murder of his own wife. Now, after Benny killed his mom, he fled to the Indian Territory. Bass Reeves took it upon himself as his duty to go out and arrest his son and bring him to justice. He tracked his son for 2 weeks in the Indian Territory before bringing him to justice and turning him over to Fort Leavenworth, where he served out the rest of his time. Now, as you've just heard, Bass Reeves had an extensive 35-year career. And some of you might be asking, well, did he capture all 3,000 of those outlaws by himself? No, he didn't. He had some help. He had help by his companion, who was a man called Lighthorse, who was basically a patrolman for the Indian Territory at the time. And all of the bounties that Bass Reeves went on, Lighthorse accompanied him. Now, some of you may be thinking that this sounds a little familiar. You've heard this before. A Western lawman with an Indian companion riding a white horse. Yes, Bass Reeves did ride a white horse. Now, some people believe that Bass Reeves, real life hero, was an inspiration for the Lone Ranger, fictional hero. That's something you can decide for yourself. Hey guys, my name is Eric Sheffield. I really appreciate you guys taking time out of your day to watch the video. I know it's been a while since we posted, so I really appreciate you guys being patient. We'll be posting stuff every week. Next week, we'll be talking about the scientist Robert Carruthers. And also, if you guys have any other interesting facts that you learned about Bass Reeves or any other Black historical figures you would like us to talk about, please put it down in the comments down below. Subscribe and share with your friends, and I hope to see you all here soon.